Eric, it's up to you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot, Chris. And as Chris mentioned, this is about the WEFE, water, energy, food, and ecosystems Nexus approach. And we're holding this lab here. We're together in order to reflect on the lessons learned, particularly in the experience in Africa, but also elsewhere, emerging experience. And we're looking at lessons learned and on the move, the role of science and digitalization, particularly, but also capacity development and further education, together with um, the how to move from policy to planning to practice, because this is often what has been stopping real progress. And for this, we've lined up a really exciting range of speakers from Central Asia, from the Interstate Commission for Water Cooperation. We have Dinara Zinganchina, and from the Amazon River Basin, the biggest basin in the world, we have Maria Lopez, and both operating in actual river basins, which are also transboundary. And then we also have, especially on the human resources front, Abu Amani, who is the director of the water division of UNESCO, one of the organizations that's been very much involved in this WEFE, water, energy, food, and ecosystems. And we're going to, this is the purpose of our lab, is to discuss some of the lessons learned and the way forward. So first, what I'll do is we'll just run briefly through what the WEFE project has actually been doing and what it consists of. So we could say the WEFE project is trying to look at water through the perspective of the user, not in an abstract sense. So that's why you see the word energy use, and food use. We know that 80% of the water is used for agriculture, so that's really important. And then, of course, ecosystems. And the ecosystem approach is also very interesting because it brings in future generations, looks at the environmental aspect, but also climate change, adaptation, and resilience. So the WEFE approach is looking at that in some way holistically. It's also a collaboration that's intended to go beyond business as usual, because it's looking at new approaches, and particularly the role of science and digitalization and modeling and scenario building, which could build up a better basis for information decision-making, better information-based for decision-making, but also for collaboration. And here, when we talk about collaboration, we can note here that the WEFE project or program is composed of a number of different partners. It's, you could say, somehow originated or co-originated by the European Union through their development arm, which is called INTPA, International Partnerships, but then working also with the Joint Research Center in Europe, two very important partners. And then another partner has been through the African Union and AMCO, and NEPAD, where AMCO is the African Ministerial Conference on Water. So it's where the water ministers get together to discuss common issues around water. Two very important partners there. And also UNESCO IHP, a really significant organization when it comes to building capacity within water. And then, of course, also there's been the centers of excellence, which have been developed through this project, various different centers of excellence. And we'll probably hear from our speaker, Abu Amani, more about the centers of excellence and the role that they've played. There's also, though, at the political level, there's also the regional economic communities. They've also been an important part of this project. So in Africa, we have the regional economic community. In Southern Africa is SADC. In West Africa is ECOWAS. In East Africa is the East African Community, but also others, IGAD and others that have been involved in this project. And of course, most importantly, the river basins themselves. And the WEFE has been experimenting with this idea of bringing sharper science to play. Digitalization, mapping, modeling, scenario building, together with capacity development, bringing that together in a number of different river basins. There's the Zambezi, there's a Lake Victoria, there's a Niger, there's a Nile itself, and a number of other river basins, mainly so far in Africa. But as you can see from our speakers, also now spreading out to other parts of the world, like Central Asia, where our speaker, Dinara, will tell us about the very special situation there and also the Amazon basin, which is massive. So this collaborative project has during a number of years has developed more than 80 different deliverables in terms of reports, in terms of manuals, in terms of capacity development tools, but also models and databases and scenario building. And this has been quite valuable. We would like to hear from the different organizations about how that's gone and what lessons have been learnt. The idea, the central thesis around this is that what science can do, and particularly when you look at digitalization and modeling, is it can bring a breakthrough by bringing organizations together to share data, but not just to share data, to share what comes out of that data. In other words, the modeling, the mapping, the digitalization, and in that way, it gives a better informed decision making, but also brings people together because there are benefits to be gained when the data is shared all together, and that can only be done when it's together. So in many ways, this is also what the project is looking. We know that doesn't work unless capacity is built. So this is the main thesis. So I should just remind everyone that as we go along, please post your messages and your any comments or questions you may have, because we would like to take them up, when we go further in this lab and we hear from our speakers. So the last thing I will do is just to reflect a little bit on some of the lessons learned that have been gathered by this project. So if I sort of focus just on 5 lessons learned. So a first lesson is bankability. To move from to get projects and to investment into a river basin, there's got to be bankable projects, and this requires a lot of capacity and a lot of preparation because it's got to be convincing. No one is going to finance or take on the burden of a loan if it's not going to be good returns. And we know that we can probably get a handle on the costs, but the benefits, that's much more difficult to work out. And that's where the science can come in. That's where the data and information can come in, to look at different scenarios which can give a convincing basis for estimating the benefits, thereby developing a bankable project. Linked to that, of course, is the use of financial instruments. And that's where the EU and banks and other organizations come in, trying to mobilize private sector funding, but also private sector funding, looking at innovative blending of grants and loans, concessionary finance, but also looking at green bonds, bank guarantees, equity instruments to release money into something which normally has an economic rate of return many times its cost. So that's the second area. The sort of third lesson has been around, I wouldn't say the tension, but the collaboration between water resources management and water resources development. So you don't want to develop and put a lot of expensive infrastructure into a place that's badly managed. Otherwise, you'd be putting water into a bucket with holes. On the other hand, if you don't have good infrastructure and good systems, it's very difficult to have good management. So the two go together. There could be the 2 legs of an Olympic runner. And it's using both legs together, got a chance of winning the gold medal. So bringing together both water resources management and water resources development. So that's looking for science and bankability of projects to get the development part, if you like. Then there's also the whole story about the river basin organizations and how important they are as organizations which can bring together collaboration across different institutional boundaries. Often the rivers are the boundary between different countries, but also technical boundaries. And you see here that the WEFE, the water, energy, food, and ecosystems, brings together quite a lot of cross-disciplinary organizations, and the importance of building up capacity within these river basin organizations, but also not increasing the administration and the bureaucracy and burden of them, which could be a detriment to implementation, as opposed to making it more fluid. So that's the fourth lesson around river basin organizations. And then the fifth that seems to be emerging is around the political economy, that you can't divorce water from the political economy and the context. And you could see that clearly in Central Asia, but also in a number of the Nile Basin, for example, to say we know the controversies that are happening now with dams in different places, etc. So the political economy is very important. Water is beholden to that, but it can also make a contribution in resolving some of getting technical cooperation from below on data management, on sharing, and scenario building, etc. Can sometimes build up to improve the context and environment. So with that said, I think I would please ask everyone who has any messages or data or things that they would like to question, to please put it onto the chat line. And then with that done, I would like to ask our first guest, Abu Amani from the UNESCO Water Science Division, to reflect on the lessons learned. He's been very much involved in this project. He's been one of the key partners of this WEFE approach in developing it, to reflect on some of the lessons learned and during these years. So please, Abu, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. Indeed, you have already highlighted some of the lessons learned, but I believe that we need to come back first on the issue of the WEFE, the water, energy, food, and ecosystem. And I think one of the lessons learned is that this is a new approach for many people, and it's also a complex approach. So in that regard, for any stakeholder analysis and gap needs analysis, we need to have time. It's really time consuming to understand what's going on within the basin. So this something is something which we are not taking into account in planning. So time consuming. The second issue I think we need to highlight is the complexity of the approach, bringing together many sectors, many partners, many stakeholders, and also at transboundary level. So this is very complex, and this has to be properly understood in order to put in place bankable program. And also, it's expensive, because if you want to have a comprehensive project which will help to address the challenges, it's very important to put the appropriate budget for that. And then also, lesson learned is on the issue of data. You see, if you want to address a complex issue, you need more and more information to do that analysis. And unfortunately, what we realize that, particularly in Africa, there is a lot of need in having more data and reliable data. So this is something which is extremely important. The third one is
I think we lost Abu there for a while. Are you back?
I'm
Abu?
back here.
Yeah. Brilliant.
So the third lesson learned is on capacity, because one of the issues is that if you want to address in a complex way the issue, we need to have capacity. You need to have reliable, skilled professionals at all levels. So those are some three issues which are very important, which can be considered as additional lesson learned in addition to what you have already identified.
Thanks, Abu. That was really great. Complexity, really an important part of this situation here with complex. It's a very complex story. It's not. I think you said very well how expensive and time-consuming it can also be. So if you have a skeleton budget, you might have skeleton results. You need to really invest enough money in to get the results, and then the data and capacity issues as well. So I think that's reflecting very well. Maybe Maria Lopez from the Amazon basin, please give us your reflections from your viewpoint about what's been learned over the years on this transboundary river basin cooperation.
Thank you very much, Eric, and thanks for the kind invitation. Well, to address the Amazon basin, it is imperative to understand, or at least be able to imagine, its enormous extension, and likewise the complexity managing a transboundary basin shared by 8 countries. We know that innovation and technology is essential here. We started this past April for the first time in multi-sectorial planning with adaptation and resilience, applying the Nexus model and that's why for us it's very new tool. This study will help us understand the interactions between the water, energy, and food sectors with 4 main objectives. The first one is conduct a regional diagnosis and identify of gaps and information gaps on water quantity, quality, water balance, infrastructure for the provision of basic service, conservation of land, water, and biodiversity. And the second one is develop hydrological scenarios, simulations, models, as well as the development of modeling tools to analyze environmental functions, ecosystem service, and global efforts in general, such as SDGs or NDCs. The objective 3 is identifying the associated investments required in the different areas with a multi-sectorial approach, and the last one, develop a proposed investment plan for the basin. This innovative instrument allows us a holistic approach in the planning, for example, in the action and with public and private investments for the basin. It also we're seeking to elevate the water sector to level of importance and priorities such as the energy and agriculture sectors. At the same time, we want to identify transboundary solutions for the water sector. On the other hand, we are currently implementing the strategic action program for transboundary water management in the Amazon. And in this frame, we are working in the installation of integrated monitoring framework for water resource through 5 networks about water quality, hydrometeorological, erosion, transport, and sedimentation, vulnerability, and adaptation to climate change. And the last one is about the environmental health at páramos and wetlands in the basin. Finally, ACTO is supporting its member countries in the implementation of source-to-sea approach as a framework for integrated land and water management, addressing interlinkages between land, water, delta, estuary, coastal zone, nurture, and ocean ecosystems. This innovative approach builds upon existing management frameworks, but broadens their scope beyond traditional independent management of land, river basin, coast, and the ocean to acknowledge their interconnections. Through the key flow of water, sediment, pollutions, biota, material and ecosystem services, and break through silos to work across sector and administrative boundaries. Reaching across these silos to build concerted action is urgently needed in the Amazon region, as many development, social, environmental, and climate change challenges are sourced to see in nature. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maria. I think some really good points there about using innovation. I'll just get this innovation and looking at deepen the diagnosis. I noticed, Maria, from the back of your picture there that you had 8 flags. Is that right? Yeah. So there's a lot of countries. Yeah. And so it's, I think that's very interesting. I think you also mentioned about the environment and climate change, which is a really important factor. So I think without further ado, I think we can ask Dinara from the Interstate Commission in Uzbekistan to reflect on some of the sort of lessons learned and the experience gathered in adopting this type of approach. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Eric. Greetings from Central Asia, where we're witnessing new dynamic in relation between the countries, with water playing ever-increasing role in fostering cooperation. I really want to emphasize that water is not a sector, it's a connector across many economic sectors and policy areas. Therefore, we see it as the best channel through which we should harness opportunities for cooperation, peace, and security in the region. And to operationalize these opportunities, we need, first of all, stop talking about problems in silos with the just line ministries and shift to discussion, evidence-based discussion of solution across sectors with involvement of finance, development ministries, prime minister offices, private sector, and the general public. And I should say that there is already that kind of intervention happening on the ground. Just let me give you one example. This May, the UN General Assembly supported Uzbekistan initiative to declare the Aral Sea area as the zone of environmental technology and innovations. And never before Aral Sea has been discussed in the language of opportunities. There's a clear sign of changing dynamic, not only in discourse, but also in action and attitudes in dealing with that kind of challenging, which is very complex, as you just discussed. And our center for many years has been monitoring the dried bed of the Aral Sea through remote sensing and institute data, field expeditions. And now there is a clear demand in that kind of data to help decision makers and practitioners to plan the risk zone, the zones for the planting trees, etc., and many other interventions that is happening on the ground. There is also plenty of other opportunities of that kind in the region. And to enable these solution-oriented discussions and measures, we need robust economic and financial modeling and analysis, both at national and regional level. Demonstrate a business case for cooperation, help countries to modify the planning processes, which are very sectoral still, increase private sector involvement in nexus-related investment, and promote integration of science, policy, technology, investment for climate-resilient nexus transformation. And together with the OECD, now we are planning and working on making this happen on the ground.
Great, thanks a lot, Dinara. I think there's some very good points there. Again, reflecting this topic of innovation that Maria mentioned and Abu was also touching on. The language of opportunities, I think, is a very fruitful way of describing it. Looking at solutions. This is often what the private sector are doing. They're not looking to solve problems, they're looking for opportunities. And I think that's a very good way forward. And the role of science here in terms of the complexity of this monitoring and working with many different parties, etc. So I think that's these are very, very, there's a lot of coherence I can see here between these different river basins, stretching almost as far as the globe allows, you know, from the Amazon basin through to the Central Asian river basins, and then down through in Africa as well. So I think it's quite interesting how this approach is really quite universal, a little bit like the SDGs. So I'm wondering whether some of our participants, if please put some messages on the chat so we can see your comments and any questions that you have. I would also ask anyone from INTPA, the EU development arm, but also the Joint Research Centre itself, which has been much involved, to participate and with some questions or comments that you may have. So whilst we wait for that, I think what we can do is that we can we've been looking here at the lessons learned and reflections over the past and some of the things that need to be put in place. I think maybe we could have a sort of a discussion now amongst our panel around the way forward and what should be done to move from policy and from planning through to implementation. And I think maybe, Abu, maybe I could ask you to discuss some of, from UNESCO's viewpoint and from your long experience of working with powerful institutions in Africa, with the regional economic communities, the AMCO, the African Ministerial Conference on Water, the African Union, and also with the development arm. You're from an international organization, the UN, how you see these different pieces of the puzzle coming together and what you would argue for and advocate to get this approach anchored in reality and scaled up. So it's not just innovation at small scale, but something that's irreversible.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you once again. Yes, as I've said, this is really a very complex approach. It needs more data, reliable information. From our perspective, we have many issues which we can look at for way forward. The first one is to make accessible the knowledge. As you know, UNESCO has been promoting open science, and it's very, very important. If there is no data, there's no evidence-based decision-making. So this is my first message, because we have been talking about climate change impact, water resource management. But in all this, if you don't know what we are dealing with, you cannot have a proper management system. So let's start with making and having reliable data and information. And this one should start, particularly in Africa, in establishing and revigorating the data collection network. In many African countries, not only Africa, in many countries, the issue of network data collection is a big issue. Indeed, Earth observation, Earth data can complement through satellite, but it cannot replace ground truth data. So this is the first thing. The science should continue informing the decision-making when it's come to WEFE. The second aspect, looking forward, will be on, I'm coming again back on this, the capacity. There is a huge gap in terms of capacity in many regions in the world, particularly in developing countries. First, to understand even the concept of sustainable development and the role of water in contributing to achieve SDGs. So this issue of capacity, as you all know, we have been working with GRC, working with the Nepal Center of Excellence in Africa. And I believe that we should continue upscaling what we did so far in building capacity at all levels, vis-a-vis the understanding of the systems, and also providing the skilled water professionals. The last point I want to emphasize on is because we are talking about river basin organization, transboundary systems, we need to have political will at the highest level. If those organizations, those member states sharing the same basin are not recognition on the importance of bringing some of their, I'm not saying to give all their sovereignty, but some of their responsibility to the river basin organization to move forward the issue of WEFE, it will be very difficult. So political will is something I believe which we need to emphasize on it so that the WEFE approach can be well disseminated, well applied within developing countries, and not only developing countries, but I'm really emphasizing because I know that developing countries are the one lagging behind when it's come to achieving SDG 6, which is unfortunately off track. We know that. And as you know, the UN system put in place what you call the SDG 6 Global Accelerator Framework to accelerate, to help member states accompany them so that they can accelerate the implementation of SDG 6, which is leaking to other SDGs. Let me stop here.
So interesting to to reflect. What about these centers of excellence? Do you see that this is has that worked? Is it something that you would advocate for other regions of the world? Maybe you could tell us a little bit, just to touch a little bit on this centers of excellence, and then I would ask our other panelists, Maria and Dinara, to maybe reflect on something of what some of the topics you touched about, data and political will and capacity, also within their own basins. But first, maybe hear a little bit from you about these centers of excellence and what exactly they were and what they did.
Yeah, as you know, the centers of excellence on water in Africa were put in place by the NEPAD, and the objective of those centers is first to improve the knowledge base and to build capacity. And UNESCO has been working with them as they are put in place in different regions of Africa, in West Africa, in Southern Africa, and also in Central and Eastern Africa. And those networks, we have been working with them to prepare in 13 countries human capacity development framework, and also identify what are the knowledge gap in terms of building capacity. So we work with them during the project and to identify, first to understand what are the gaps and needs when it comes to the capacity building, focusing at the level of junior professional and also technician level, because as you know, the issue of capacity building is huge. So we focus on the technician and also the junior professional. And then we work with them to have some pilot training courses based on the priority area identified. And unfortunately, because of the COVID-19, we was obliged to move from face-to-face training to do e-learning training. So we reorganized all the package of training materials to put them on e-learning. And this was very fantastic. And at the end of this, we were able to reach out to around 700 junior and senior technicians, including 41% of women. So we should continue this because we believe that strengthening the capacity is really the way forward. There is still a lot of gap. So this concept can be upscaled first in Africa, because we have only limited number of, we work with 10 centers of excellences, but we can have more so that we can help member state countries to come out with their human capacity development framework. As I said, we prepare 13 human capacity development framework in 13 countries. So we have more other countries to cover. So we need to upscale it. And also we need to see also the connection with other centers of excellence, because it's not only those centers of excellence which are existing in Africa. We have also centers of excellence coming from UNESCO network, because we have many UNESCO centers in the world, also in Africa. I believe that we can put in place a kind of platform on centers of excellence on water in the world, providing the relevant skill and training so that member states all over the world can benefit for that.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think that sounds also something that, that sort of collaboration between different centers of excellence. There's, in many different regions, there are many universities. I'm sure in the Amazon basin, maybe there's 100 universities. maybe that's too low. I don't know. Maybe more than 100. And in Uzbekistan, we know in the, one of the very good things about the Soviet days was that there was a tremendously strong technical background. They sent people to the moon, they were the first in space. So I think that that's also something that can be built upon. But I thought it was very interesting what you said there about, Abu, about the meteorological stations. Many countries around the world, the meteorological situation is worse now than it was before. I think to a certain extent you find that in Central Asia, but also many parts of Africa. I don't know so much about the Amazon basin, but in remote sensing is really a good thing and it's helped a lot. But there's also, as you say, got to be the ground truth. And maybe, Maria, maybe you reflecting a little bit about the future and how to move from policy and planning to implementation, some of these ideas of centers of excellence, etc., the importance of capacity development to unlock the problems. Maybe it'd be interesting to hear your reflections about how you see, as a general secretary of this organization, what your vision is for making a change.
Thank you, Eric. Yes, identifying challenge and priority, we consider that there are different factors are affecting the adoption of emerging technologies, like, for example, intellectual property, the agility and institutional capacity in public and private sector, the enabling policy and institutional environment, resource availability, and others. These factors have mean unequal adoption of these technologies overall in our countries and in other parts of the world. And that's why we think that we need more cooperation between developed and developing countries, especially in sharing these new technology that are being applied and that are low cost for the management of water resource. our 8 member countries of ACTO, we already have a common vision and holistic multi-sectoral basin perspective, and also some of our countries are modernizing their water resource institutions, for example, and developing national water resource information system and analytics to support basin planning and disaster management. We are trying that all our countries have this priority to reduce skills and information asymmetries. With the implementation of our project, we're working and trying to develop a modern water information system that allows an integration data from regional, national, and local source, data quality management, conversion to interoperable data service that is very, very complicated, and development of interactive dashboard, for example, to help access and visualize data service and associate analytical in appropriate formats to support decisions. This last part, for example, we will cover with the installation of our Amazon Regional Observatory. Finally, I want to say that in our countries, that there are many professionals who are committed to this adoption of these kind of tools for the management of the water resource of our basin. That we believe that a strong leadership at the technical level, for example, of public managers, and of course at the political level, that's to be supported. It will also be important to create a strong leadership, to create an enabling environment to facilitate this modernized approach to planning and managing this huge basin. And of course, one of the key elements for trying to do in a very concrete manner this kind of actions is, of course, to have secure and sustainable financings.
I think that Maria, some very, very interesting points there about the technology, but also the cooperation between developed and developing countries, or between, maybe you could just say, between countries that are experimenting in different ways, whether they're developed or not developed. So some of the most developed countries are also the most polluted. Biggest problem. And so I think that cooperation is really important. And we're here on the European Development Days. So that's somehow very important, and ABU from UNESCO, that exists partly to transfer information and skills and experience across the world. So I think that's really important. We have a number of questions coming up around jobs and the small scale private sector. Are they relevant for this? What can they do? After all, river basin management is nothing more than the collection of 1 million different decisions that are made every day by ordinary people. Farmers, for example, and others. So mainly people in the private sector, one way or the other. So that's an important topic around jobs. Maybe, Dinara, I could ask you to reflect a little bit on your experience of moving from policy to practice, and maybe think a little bit about this element of that's been raised by one of the participants concerning jobs, and what are the benefits that much better river basin management can lead to in terms of employment and income. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Eric. Indeed, it's one of the main points, at least in Central Asia, where agriculture it's one of the main sectors of employment for people, and they're very much dependent not only on the income but also the whole livelihood of people. It's around the rural areas and their habitat, and that's why how water is managed, it's very important in terms of income of these people and raising income. And also about the jobs, I would like to reflect on what Mr. Armani said about the capacity building. I think it's really essential to link all capacity development activities to jobs, because now at least the water sector is not that attractive as it used to be. You mentioned the Soviet time, the technical expertise in the Soviet Union, and especially on irrigation and drainage and hydro facilities, was very high in the Soviet Union. And the water professionals had very high paid salaries and reputation. And it was a very big kind of competition to get to the university and be a water professional, but it's not the same anymore. And I think we have to create this create the attractiveness of the sector, show how it's important, and probably provide more attractive jobs, not only in the government structure, but also in the private sector, which is very much involved. And that's why we have to work with the youth, and also with the economic sectors, trying to connect these two kind of very important for Central Asia areas. Political support is very important, but as we've seen in the recent years, political support is not enough. It has to be supported by the technical knowledge and evidence base. That's why economic and financial analysis and modeling are very important, and science and policy interface is the area that it's not fully covered. We see these gaps between the knowledge and evidence that we already have and the needs of decision makers. Just going back to the example on the Aral seabed, for many years we were drawing and collecting risk zone maps for practitioners to plant trees in the dried bed sea. And only now they got this demand, and only now they see how much money, it's a real cost they can save if they plant in the areas that was suggested, recommended by our scientists. And but Central Asia is the one of the region with the lowest investment in research and development, which has to be increased, and it's already gaining momentum in Uzbekistan, where it has been increased just a few months ago. So it's really a range of different issues, political, economic, and social. And when we talk about WEFE, it's indeed about not only sectors, but approach, talking across different sectors about the same issues. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dinara. I'm just going to, as we sort of wrap up, we've got another sort of question feeding through concerning, well, what is it that the EU development arm, INTPA, and the Joint Research Centre in Italy, the EU Joint Research Centre, and UNESCO Water Division, what is it that they can do to be helpful? What is it that you would look to those organizations in moving from policy to practice? And maybe I could ask the river basin organizations, Maria, maybe you could just give us just half a minute idea of two things that you think that they should be doing. And then yourself, Dinara. Two things that you think that this UNESCO, the Joint Research Centre, and the EU development arm, INTPA, what should they be doing? Two things.
Thank you, Eric. Well, right now we are trying to sign a MOU with UNESCO, with the PHE program, just, for example, to facilitate the use of the platform. For a lot of our countries, it's a little bit complicated to buy or to have this kind of technical and this kind of technology to share, for example, in real-time monitoring. So we think one of the key issues is trying to have a low cost in this kind of technology. That is why we're approximately, for example,
so if I jump in there, transfer of technology from UNESCO and from others, and the joint research. What about yourself, Dinara? Just the main thing that you would like these organizations to do.
They do a lot, but it will be nice if they also involve more local expertise and be more demand-driven and try to harness opportunity that exist in different regions.
Great. So we have two things there: transfer of technology, be more demand-driven, use local expertise, and develop capacity on the job. I think that's basically all we've got time for. Unfortunately, we weren't able to see all the questions that came up, but we had some interesting ones around jobs and around the centers of excellence and around what it is that these organizations should actually be doing in support. So I think that's the end of our time, if I've got it right. So Chris, back to you.
Yes, Eric, thank you very much. I mean, interesting that you're talking about cooperation between internationals and locals, and that there be that sort of give and take, and that communication between the two is very, very important. As we saw in that project with 17 countries in West Africa, we're going to be looking at this as well in this next section on transboundary watersheds, looking at the Senegal River Basin, also in West Africa. Also talking about technology transfer, very important there as well. So good points made, Eric. Thank you very much. And let's move on to our next section on the Senegal River Basin.